Okay, with no hockey on tonight, I've been kind of like, all right, I'm just gonna chill. I'm gonna talk some Doctor Who on my other channel. I'm gonna do a podcast, which I did today, and test out a little video game somebody wanted me to endorse, but sadly, it's not my thing. So, what to talk about? How about next year's unrestricted free agent market and who I think is most likely to move at the deadline or before then? Because remember, the earlier you move a player, I think the bigger the package you get back. I do. I think on deadline day, you might make out with a king's ransom, like the Rangers did with Rick Nash last year, or you may end up not with a king's ransom like the Canucks with Vanek last year. So let's take a look at the top 10. I will say, though, Mott has been decent this year. Outplayed Gagne. That's why Gagne is playing for the Toronto Marlies. And for anybody wondering why the Marlies, it's because Sam Gagne's family lives in Ontario, and the Vancouver Canucks, to be decent, decided if we're sending him to the minors, we should at least, be aware of the fact that he does live in that area, and we'll loan him to the Marlies so he's at least around his family while he's collecting $3 million for playing in the AHL. So that's the beauty of a one-way contract. Anyways, here are the top 10 most likely. And at number 10, I'm just going to put their last names because I shouldn't have to put their first names. Panarin from the Columbus Blue Jackets. Why do I have him at 10? If he's an unrestricted free agent, don't they want to move him? I don't know. Because if they're in a position to be in the playoffs, trading away Panarin could be foolish. It could be an absolutely foolish decision made by a GM who's generally not foolish. I really think that Kekalainen decided, okay, we're going to keep Panarin, we're going to keep Bobrovsky. I don't think he feels any rush. Panarin won't discuss a deal during the season. After the season's over, I think there'll be a hard push by Columbus to keep him. I really can't see them moving him at the deadline. But if Columbus finds himself out of a playoff position, or just it's clear they're not going the right direction, maybe Panarin's hot start ends up not meaning a whole lot and he fizzles for 15-game stretch. For whatever reason, he could end up getting moved, so I have to put him on the list. If I don't have him on the list, then people are going to be like, where's Panarin? Number 9, and I kind of have to put his first name, because otherwise people are going to be like, who? So Mike Smith of Calgary. Why? Because I think Riddick and Gillies, I know Riddick is ready to play regular minutes, and if Riddick is ready, maybe they bring in Gillies, and maybe, and this would depend on Calgary having a below expectation season. So let's say they're 10 points out of the playoffs at the trade deadline, then Mike Smith would be had for a rental, where they say, okay, who would take him? And somebody, I think, will take him. There's enough teams with goaltending issues right now that I think you could see Mike Smith being a popular guy at a trade deadline. And, Calgary doesn't want to get nothing for him, and I think it's pretty clear that this would be his last season. Number 8, I thought about putting up Stone, but I really think Stone's going to end up staying in Ottawa. I don't think Stone's going to get moved. That being said, I do think if Matt Duchene doesn't get it together, and if Matt Duchene makes it clear to Ottawa, hey, I don't want to go through this rebuild thing, I don't want to be here for this, Duchene's going to find himself gone again at the deadline. And as much as it might terrify Senators fans to think of Dorian trading away another big piece, especially one that he paid a heavy price to get, I could see Duchene going at the deadline. And it could be another tire on the fire, but we'll see. That's why he's at 8. I don't have him higher because I don't know how likely it is he's going to move. But if they don't think they're going to re-sign him, they have to get something back. And I think they would want a first-round pick back. So at least they can say, well, we have a first-rounder. It's not as high up as the one we would have had, but we have one. Number 7. Remember a couple of years ago, St. Louis decided to move Shattenkirk at the deadline? And last year they moved Stastny at the deadline? They don't mind moving a guy who's going to be a UFA. And they don't care if they're in a playoff spot when they do it. GM Armstrong has been very, very clear he doesn't want to lose somebody for nothing, and Bouwmeester fits the bill. Not only that, but their defensive depth means Bouwmeester, I could see him getting traded, I could see them retaining salary, and I could see him being a very valuable pickup at the deadline for a contending team, or, just being a pickup for whoever, because I think St. Louis would rather get something back than not get anything back for him. At 6, Alexander Edler does have a no-trade clause, but I think he'd be willing to waive it. Rewind a few years, we had Dan Hamhuis in Vancouver. Rumor had it, and he says he was never asked, but the rumor was always that he wouldn't waive his no-trade clause at the deadline to go to Dallas, so they didn't end up making the deal. Dallas gets Russell instead. Russell's a disaster in Dallas. Maybe if they had Hammer, things would have turned out different. I don't think Edler would argue against a move. And the thought process is this, that Edler would go at the deadline and then as a UFA on July 1st end up back in Vancouver, which will make some Canuck fans happy and others would be like, oh, seriously? But yeah, that's the rumor of how this could end up going. Edler right now, honestly, early in the season, he's looked pretty good. And there's always a demand for defensemen. I think he could bring back a pretty solid package. I think, again, Benning would be looking for a middle-of-the-road prospect, and probably a second-round draft pick would probably get it done for Edler. Number 5, he's always on the move. I don't see any reason why Vanek won't move again at the deadline. Detroit's 0-2-2 right now as I'm recording this, and Vanek's a guy that could definitely bring back a decent return, I would think. But again, he has to improve his game a little bit off where he's been at the start of the year. And there will be a contender somewhere that would look at Vanek. I mean, Detroit would have to probably retain some salary or something along those lines. But there's going to be a contending team somewhere that says, all right, we'll add a winger. We'll add a top 9 winger at the deadline. And I think Vanek would be a decent addition. Number 4, Skinner's a UFA at the end of the year. And while Buffalo, it looks like a robbery from Carolina to get Jeff Skinner, he is still a rental. And until he signs in Buffalo, I do think that he is likely to get moved. I think Buffalo would get back more than they gave up to get him, which is a victory. And Buffalo needs those victories in all fashions. At the draft table, the trade table, and on the ice. And for Skinner, I think they could do well. I definitely think they could probably get more than Carolina got for him. But Skinner being pointless through the first 4 games kind of is an example of why he was available in the first place. Why Carolina was willing to say, okay, this is a 30-goal scorer, but we'll move him out. At this stage, as I'm recording this, Carolina's near the top. Very limited sample size. And they don't seem to be missing Skinner a whole lot. It looks like Svechnikov has more than made up the difference. But over an 82-game schedule, we'll see. But Skinner, he's young. And if a team could trade for him and then sign him to an extension after the deadline, it could be a really big deal. Number 3. I mentioned goalies. And I think Detroit's going to be in the market to move Jimmy Howard. I think they've been in the market to move him for probably a little bit. But I think at this year's deadline, because he'll be a pure rental, there's no contract beyond this season, I think Jimmy Howard could very well be the guy to leave. Detroit has Bernier, and then they don't have a whole lot behind that. But honestly, Howard is at that stage in his career where he's not going to get back to who he was before. He was a very decent goaltender at his prime. He can still play well for short periods. And there will be a team somewhere that, again, going to the playoffs, will say, man, we could really use like a Ryan Miller in Anaheim. We need a backup like that. And they'll call Detroit, and Detroit will make him a deal for Howard. Number 2, every time you hear about rumors with Philadelphia, Wayne Simmons is involved. It's because Simmons is big. He has a presence on the ice that is unique, and he can score in bunches. He is not always consistently using that size. He's not always consistently hitting, and he's not always consistently a scoring threat. But he gives you enough glimpses of all of those things that he is a very popular target for other GMs. And I would think that as a rental this year, even if Philly's in a playoff spot, they'd be very curious to find out what Simmons might be worth on the market. He might end up being worth enough that Ron Hextall says, you know what, we're in the playoffs, but I can't turn down what I'm being offered for Simmons, and you end up seeing him go. And I could see him going back to LA. I could absolutely see that happening. He does bring a lot to the game, but he doesn't bring so much. And he's not that elite forward that fully would say, oh, we can't lose him. So I could see Simmons going at the deadline. And remember, this is most likely, in my eyes, just looking over the UFAs for next summer. Number one on the list for me, going back to the Rangers. I'm stunned that Matt Zuccarello didn't get moved this summer, to be honest. I am stunned that Zuccarello, with the energy he provides, with that it factor he seems to have on the ice, that nobody made an offer to the Rangers that they couldn't refuse. And I would think that Zuccarello at the deadline could be a fantastic addition for somebody. Now, again, this is a combination of who I think is most likely to move and who I think will be too tempting not to move for for GMs. And I stayed away from players that are on contending teams like a Joe Thornton in San Jose. I stayed away from guys that I think, like Bobrovsky. Well, Bobrovsky isn't going anywhere because he's Columbus' starter. So even if it doesn't look like he's going to stay in Columbus, even if he wants $11 million, I just can't see them moving him. Because you can move Panarin. You might be able to get back enough for Panarin. That's why I have Panarin at 10, because he might move. But I just can't see it being worth it to move Bobrovsky. I can't see a team offering enough that Columbus would look and go, yep, we'll give up our starter, a Vezina winner, for that package. Because I don't know that Korpisalo can replace Bobrovsky, and I don't know that they have anybody else in their organization currently that could replace him. And when you look at the UFA market for goalies for next year, it's not a tremendous list. So now you're looking to replace Bobrovsky with another goaltender. Honestly, I would be very surprised if Bobrovsky doesn't re-sign in Columbus. It's a matter of for how much. But let me know which potential UFA next summer you've got your eye on that you think is most likely to move. And as the season goes along, we'll see how many of these guys move and how many stay where they are. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.